Hello everyone. In this video, we will learn how to implement a level aggregate plan. A level aggregate plan maintains a constant workforce and produces the same amount of product in each time period of the plan. We have the data for a telephone company that employs workers who lay telephone cables and perform various other operations. Each worker puts in 600 hours of regular time per planning period and can work as many as 100 hours of overtime. The operations department has estimated the following workforce requirements for such services over the subsequent 4 planning periods. The company pays regular time wages of $6,000 per employee per period for any time worked up to 600 hours, and that includes undertime. The overtime pay rate is $15 per hour over 600 hours. Hiring, training, and outfitting a new employee costs around $8,000. Layoff costs are $2,000 per employee. Currently, there are 40 employees that work for the company. No delays in service or back orders are allowed. You are required to prepare the level strategy plan, relying only on overtime and undertime. Also, maximize the use of overtime during the peak period to minimize the workforce level and amount of undertime. Now, to convert the demand requirements into employee period equivalents, we divide the demand in hours by 600. For example, the demand of 21,000 hours in period 1 translates into 35 employee period equivalents. We calculate the demand for period 2, 3, and 4 using the same approach. To implement aggregate level strategy, the first step is to identify the peak demand. The peak demand is 30,000 hours in period 3. Since each employee can work 700 hours per period, that includes 600 hours on regular time and 100 hours on overtime. The workforce level of the level strategy that minimizes the undertime is calculated by dividing the peak demand hours by maximum number of hours each employee can work. So we divide 30,000 hours by 700 hours, that is equivalent to 42.86 or 43 employees. So that is the number of required workers to meet the peak demand in period 3. Now, in order to implement the level strategy, we will hire 3 employees in the first quarter. Next, we calculate the total cost of period 1 using the level strategy. The forecasted demand for period 1 is 35 workers. We set the workforce level at 43 based on our calculations in the last slide. Since we have 40 workers in our company, so it means we have to hire 3 workers to make our workforce level equal to 43. Once we have 43 workers in our workforce, we will offer undertime to 8 workers and there will be no overtime. We will set the utilized time for 35 workers and there will be 3 hires in period 1 and there will be no layoffs. We calculate the hiring cost for 3 workers as $24,000 and the undertime cost for 8 workers will be $48,000. There will be no overtime cost and the utilized time cost for 35 workers will be equal to $210,000. The overall total cost will be the sum of utilized time cost, hiring cost, and undertime cost. So in that case, the total cost will be equal to $282,000. Next, we calculate the cost for time period 2. The forecasted demand for time period 2 is 30 workers. The workforce level is at 43. In that case, we will offer undertime to 13 workers and there will be no overtime. The utilized time will be for 30 workers. There will be no hiring in time period 2 and there will be no layoffs. To calculate the utilized time cost, we have the cost of 30 workers, which is equivalent to $180,000. The undertime cost for 13 workers will be equal to $78,000, and the overtime cost will be 0. There will be no hiring cost and no layoff cost. So the overall cost for time period 2 will be equal to the sum of utilized time cost, undertime cost, and overtime cost. That total cost would be equal to $258,000. Next, we calculate the cost for implementing level strategy in time period 3. Remember that in time period 3, we have the maximum demand in the planning period. The forecasted demand for time period 3 is 50. We have already set the workforce level at 43. There will be no undertime for time period 3, but we will offer overtime to 7 workers. We will set the utilized time equal to 43 workers. There will be no hiring in time period 3, and there will be no layoffs. To calculate the cost, we calculate the utilized time cost of 43 workers. The undertime cost will be 0, and the overtime cost will be for 7 workers. This is how we calculate the cost of overtime. $6,000 is the cost of regular 600 hours, and for extra 100 hours, we have an overtime rate of $115. So the overall overtime cost is $52,500. There will be no hiring cost in this case, and there will be no layoff cost. So the total cost for time period 3 will be equal to utilized time cost plus undertime cost plus overtime cost, and the total cost would be equal to $310,500. Moving on to time period 4, we have a forecasted demand of 20 workers. The workforce level is already set at 43 workers. There will be an undertime of 23 workers, and there will be no overtime for time period 4. The utilized time will be set for 20 workers. There will be no hires and there will be no layoffs. The utilized time cost for 20 workers will be equal to $120,000. The undertime cost will be for 23 workers, that is equivalent to $138,000. The overtime cost will be 0, and there will be no hiring cost and no layoff cost. The total cost will be equal to utilized time cost plus undertime cost plus overtime cost. So the total cost in this case will be $258,000. Here we have the summary of the cost of implementing the level strategy. Remember that level strategy only relies on overtime and undertime. Finally, the total cost of fulfilling the demand for these 4 time periods using the level strategy is around 1.1 million US dollars. And this is how we implement the level strategy for a given time period. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.